Nice night, ain't it? Welcome aboard. Okay, Wednesday. Middle of the week on a Wednesday, the 16th of August, 2023. The world keeps turning. World keeps burning. And here we are. We're going to be doing another fun show tonight. I'm excited not only for this show, but I'm excited for the third session of book club tonight that begins at 8:30 for The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson with co-host Lindsay Sharman of the Rogue Ways podcast. So that happens tonight. For those of you who are going to be on board, but you have some thoughts that you have yet to contribute to the official thread, you still have time to get in there on the forum. Get read. Have it read aloud tonight in the session. But in the meantime, we have a lot of great conversation to have, and that is with Dr. Diana Pasulka. She is the author of books with titles like American Cosmic, and in November has a new book coming out called Encounters, and we're going to get into what all that means very, very soon. In the meantime, I'd like to thank my sponsors who mean the world to me and mean the world to a lot of people out there, and will continue to mean more and more. But of course, they are most useful when everybody else is not panicked for what they have. That is BlueMonsterPrep.com. And if you have been watching the news, if you, in any way, shape, or form over the last couple of years, you have seen every kind of disaster known to man, natural and otherwise. And even natural disasters seem to be a little bit more enhanced than usual. So go to BlueMonsterPrep.com and take a look at everything that you can possibly get for the house or a fallback location or anything like that to make your transition from where you are now to safer dwellings a little bit easier. There's two-way communications over there that you should get: radios, solar power generators, gas masks, heirloom seeds for your crisis garden, drinking water filtration, emergency food. You can never be too prepared. All the first aid you can possibly need, whether they be first aid kits, first aid cabinets, or specialty devices. They have it all, and they have the knowledge with which to train you. So go and call up Pat and Gina at BlueMonsterPrep.com. Say Frank sent you. Use the Frankly promo code. Get your shipping taken off the top of it, and make sure you go to bed with a little bit more peace of mind, because whether it's fire or chemical attack or whatever the hell it is, lights going out, it's just good to have a little bit more insurance that you can control and that is physical. And that's what all this stuff is, after all, insurance. All right, what else do we have? Go and check out everybody on the affiliates page. Got wonderful friends there. Wonderful friends there just waiting for you. Tomorrow, great guests. Friday, great guests. I think Matt will be in studio Friday, I think. He's in the emergency room right now. He slipped and fell. I don't know if he passed out or something. We'll see. But he's getting stitches in his eye right now, and he says he's getting a fat lip. So he didn't get into a fight with anybody, but he fell. Something happened. I don't know what he's going to... He just sent us a picture of him with a gash in his head. I said, oh, God. What now? That's all I got for you on this end of things, so perhaps there'll be more to report later on. Okay, into the grab bag we go. First one up is from San Francisco, sfgate.com. What do you know? Here is a headline featuring Catherine Feinstein. You know who she is? Everybody should know. She's the daughter of American royalty, Dianne Feinstein. American royalty. Catherine Feinstein says Senator Dianne Feinstein is a victim of elder abuse in filings. Yes, and 3 years ago, it was just abuse by an elder. Dianne being the elder who abused us and everybody else. Elder abuse. Let's see here. The co-trustees of a trust in the name of Richard Blum the deceased, wealthy husband of... Oh, I didn't know that Dianne Feinstein's husband died. The co-trustees of in the name of Richard Blum were accused of elder abuse against Feinstein in recent court filings submitted by her daughter, Catherine, who has limited power of attorney over the senator. I did not know that Richard Blum had died. Dianne and Richard made themselves very, very wealthy on top of whatever else they had going on by steering a lot of contracts into their personal circles. The filing submitted August 8th partially confirmed what had previously been reported by other outlets that Catherine Feinstein, a former San Francisco County Superior Court judge and current San Francisco Fire Commissioner, has limited power of attorney over her mother, which is the senator signed over to her in July of this year. The recent court filing notes that this entitles Catherine to make legal decisions for her mother in certain civil-related matters. So, as I was reading this, at first I thought that, so they got this going on. But, man, how the downfall is just quick. Quick. You'd never think that Dianne Feinstein, just like 2 years ago, was capable of being abused with the way that she was able to make people like Lisa Murkowski cower in a corner like Big Bird. Anyway. So, there's trouble on the horizon over there. The baby elephants are trying to squeeze their way into the tent and make sure that they are set up for the new generation. Here's a headline from Zero Hedge from Hawaii, and there continues to be more and more coming out of Hawaii. We're gonna open up our Hawaii hotline again sometime this week, maybe even on Friday night as a side thing. Why is there such a frenzy to buy up properties that were just burned down during the fires in Hawaii? I would also recommend you all go out and watch our friend Grace, Really Graceful's second video, a part 2 of what they're not telling you is going on out there in Hawaii. I'll have both part 1 and part 2 added into the weekend lineup on quitefrankly.tv. But for now, if you want to jump over there, it's really good stuff, and it begs a lot of questions that I'm sure are going to go unanswered. But at this point, at least the questions are becoming more and more rhetorical. You know what I mean? Can you imagine calling up a family that has just seen their home burned to the ground and offering to buy their land for below market value? This is apparently happening in Hawaii right now on a massive scale. Grieving property owners are being bombarded with calls from very greedy people, and I think that says a lot about the current state of our society. We literally worship material possessions and financial gain, and the sheer greed that we are witnessing at this moment is absolutely staggering. This is from Michael Snyder at mostimportantnews.com. So apparently there are a lot of very ambitious real estate collectors and developers that are trying to gobble up now land that has been burnt to a crisp, land that in many cases probably was passed down through God knows how many centuries. We're talking about an ancient culture out there. Maui was hit harder than anywhere else by the fires, and turned out that, Lahaina was hit harder inside of Maui. And it turns out that property owners in the area have been getting pressured to sell for a long time. So now that disaster has struck, those that wish to get their hands on these prime properties are in a feeding frenzy. One local resident made headlines all over the world after she posted a video about this. Filming herself in a recent video, the Hawaii resident said the following, quote, "I'm so frustrated with investors and realtors calling the families who lost their home, offering to buy their land. How dare you do that to our community right now? If you're a victim and they are calling you, please get their business names so we can put them on blast." She claims in the clip that she personally knows multiple families that were offered money from investors and realtors. When 2020 began, the average home in Lahaina was worth about $600,000. Today, the average home in Lahaina is worth about $1 million. Now, there is a race to take advantage of those who have just had their homes burned down, and it has gotten so bad that even Hawaiian Governor Josh Green is speaking out against it. See, we're going to see, and it's going to have to be something that we keep track of, that people keep track of independently, and it's going to be something that people in Hawaii are going to have to take up that mantle and report on things as they develop out there. That is going to be the best source of information that we get in the next couple of years, as we see just who and what sinks their talons into Maui to rebuild. Who's getting what contracts, what families are getting pushed out, what how many hands are going to be changed over with the ownership over this land, what kind of AI influence there's going to be, what kind of world economic influence there's going to be. This is just like Ukraine. They already had many, many declarations about how Ukraine was going to be rebuilt, talking about it gleefully as they still continue to shovel tens of thousands of now barely trained young Ukrainian boys into meat grinders against what seems to be an impervious Russian force. And the same is going to be so about the rebuilding in Hawaii. But like we said before, how much time is left in the hourglass for the concerted reporting on what's going on out there from mainstream media? One day the flip is going to be switched off, and you're not going to hear from MSNBC, CNN, and Fox anymore. It's just going to have to be something that is a little bit more of a local effort. So we'll see what happens there. But as far as this stuff goes, this is all over the place. As you know, I talked about it when we lost our good friend Pam when she died in December. She had asked me couple of years ago to be the executor to her estate, and of course I said okay. I knew it was a serious thing, but I didn't think that it was going to be a reality for me to face 2 years, 3 years later, whatever the hell it was. Well, I'm just starting I'm reporting to the first citation in court about the probate hearings. We haven't even gotten to the accounting phase here. I haven't even paid the funeral home yet. Me personally, I paid for all of the burial, everything so far, and it's been really crazy how long this has been drawn out. I have not even been acknowledged by the court as the executor of the state. I'm just being a friend at this point, and I can't tell you how many times I have gotten mail and calls from people all over the place coming to me and asking about her house, which it's not even her house. It's her husband's house. So there's no house to give or anything like that. I don't have any authority like that anyway, even if I were executor. But how do these people know that I was named as a candidate inside of somebody's private last will and testament when no court in the country has even appointed me as executor yet? So whatever the hell these real estate companies are tapped into, it's spooky. It's spooky. I got the first couple of offers on Pam's property came to me within a couple of weeks of her death. At that time, we haven't even had her. This has been the whole damn thing. So when you think about an entire island or a section of an island burning to the ground that had property value like that, don't you think that every vulture from here to Timbuktu wasn't going to start circling around that? So it's not necessarily a conspiracy. As it comes to that, we definitely have to see who's going to get the capture and win the rights to rebuild that island, especially with all of the past planning and the smart island concepts that have been floated in the recent past. But as far as this goes, it may be, unethical, unsavory, kind of shameful behavior. But this is happening all over the place. I just know from personal experience. This happened to me. Okay. All right. Oh, here's another one for you. Speaking of Russia. This one is from War Clandestine on Twitter. Great account to follow. Really, really great account to follow. He shared this 2-minute clip. A must-watch Russian Chief of Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Protection, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, on Zvezda today. Listen to this. He said the U.S., have a policy of global biological control. They control that by creating artificial biological crises. They can rule the world through that. Kirillov highlights how U.S. big pharma companies have enriched themselves by release of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, how the damage from the pandemic is dozens times greater than the aftermath of World War II. And this is coming from a guy who represents Russia, who lost more people in that war than anybody, in a war that claimed 56 million across the world. But of course, I would say that there's so much more at stake here right now. He also highlights Russia's repeated effort to bring thousands of documents to the UN with which the U.S. repeatedly denies to cooperate. Those documents were about proving that we had clandestine biological laboratories all along the countryside in Ukraine, especially closer to the Russian border. These are the things that actually mapped up with those early bombing strafes from the Russians. And War Clandestine was one of the people out there who were connecting the dots early on in the war as well. Of course, that is what prompted him to lose access to his Twitter account until recently. Was silenced early on when it was clear that the Russians were first and foremost trying to cripple any and all biological activity that we had going on in Ukraine that was supposed to be kept silent. And God knows what was going on out there. God knows what that was going to be the staging ground for, and what had already been the staging ground. What it already had served, what purpose it had already served. But it's incredible to listen to this. Let's get to this one clip over here. I'm gonna have to speak a little bit for you. Hold on. Here we go. She says the growth in illnesses caused by atypical infections has been noted in a number of countries right now. So we can say that this is the result of some help from American biologists. She's asking the Kirillov. He says, we can't say this so indiscriminately, but we are public officials after all. As for biological weapons, if we assess the damage caused by COVID over the course of 2 years around the world, the main pandemic lasted 2 years. It cannot even be compared with the damage from World War II. It is dozens of times greater. However, those who make the profit, such as Big Pharma... Do you mean all the pharmaceutical companies, she asks? Yes, the profits of the pharma companies, which are mainly in the U.S., they are colossal. That's the way it is. She says, so the question is being asked, we provide the documents. He says, yes, we provided the documents to the UN. The reaction of the USA we are talking about is typical. There has not been a single refutation of the documents that we presented. We sent more than 2,000 pages of these documents to the United Nations. What sort of reply did you receive? The interviewer asks. We usually get two replies, a standard one from the United States. That is all that is done is in the interest of the national security of the United States. That's the standard right there. And you must trust us. And trust them blindly. Yes, trust them blindly. They have the policy of global biological control. They understood that this works, and by creating artificial crises, which are biological in nature, they can rule the world. There is nothing they do for free. Even when they provide supplies to certain states free of charge, they are not as free of charge as they say. I mean, that's, hey, first they went to the United Nations and tried to bring the claim there with whatever documentation that obviously we have not seen. We've just gotten the cover story, and there is a unified front over there on the NATO end of things, but and on the Victoria Nuland, Margot Rubio side of things. And then there's this. That is pretty bold to come out in public and talk about that. Really is. But hey, good news. Did you hear? Doctors have transplanted a pig kidney into a person a month ago, and it is still working. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Part man, part pig. The genetically modified pig kidney. Oh. Transplanted into a brain-dead person has worked for 32 days and counting, advancing efforts to use animals to ease perennial shortages for humans. Dr. Robert Montgomery and colleagues at NYU Langone Health in New York City transplanted the pig kidney into a 57-year-old Maurice Miller on July 14th. The results, which haven't been published, might provide researchers with data to support clinical trials testing animal-to-human transplants. That right there is just ghoulish. It's ghoulish. You say, hey, listen, if you need, if it's buying you some time, I'm sure you might take me. Most people would take a pig kidney over no kidney at all, I'm sure, but it is ghoulish. NYU Langone researchers had previously studied pig hearts and kidneys in humans up to 72 hours. The shorter period allowed them to see whether the human immune system would immediately reject the pig organs. Transplants of pig organs into baboons had shown another risky period around 14 to 30 days after the procedure. Extending the duration of studies in brain-dead humans to 30 days and beyond provides new insights, including whether immunosuppressive drugs used in standard kidney transplants can help prevent rejection of pig organs, Montgomery said. Studying pig organ transplant for longer periods requires keeping brain-dead people on ventilators, raising ethical and scientific questions. For instance, extending the length of studies, delaying burials, and closure for families. Yeah, you're essentially taking somebody who is not, if they're brain dead, if they're gone, there's nothing coming back. You're talking about just keeping tissue alive so that you can do whatever the hell else. For instance, extending the length of studies delays burial and closure for families. Brain death is defined in the U.S. as irreversible cessation of brain function, even if heart and lung activity can be maintained with machines. It's just, things that you already don't want to think about. And unfortunately, we have to face from time to time. But the whole human to animal thing, there is just something about that ain't kosher. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. 7:16 p.m. I want to talk a little bit about our guest tonight and what the topics are going to be. And then if we have any time before the 8:30 sayonara, then we'll take some calls. And we're definitely going to get to your Super Chats. So send them to quitefranklysuperchat.com. The Rumble Rants, the Gold Pills on Foxhole. I look forward to getting around to all of them. So, with that being said, we will be right back.
You tune in at your own enjoyment, because it is the best show since the beginning of time. It has technological advancements and a more sophisticated approach. But like every great awakening that has preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is a friend and truth is essential. You are now entering, quite frankly. Now take off your pants. And jacket.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay?
That we've been talking about a little bit lately, especially last night. Last night we had a great show. I think Timothy Alberino already mirrored the talk that we had on his channel, so some of you might be new to the show, coming on over since last night. Still, that was great. That was a lot of fun to talk about what's going on in Peru. I'm thinking that a lot of people out there in these remote, little bit more, I'm not isolated, but these little more remote areas of the world, who knows what kind of tales they have and experiences that they have already had to adapt into their lives. They've already had to make concessions about what this means, about their thoughts about the vastness of the universe, or even just the innerverse over here. What if they're coming from another frequency of light and just blipping in and blipping out and being a menace, and whatever the hell's going on? Is it military? Is it all a psyop? Are we talking about advanced technology and psychological warfare to the umpteenth degree? You never know. You never know. But we will continue on with some of those bigger questions tonight, even some supernatural themes, with our guest, Dr. Diana Walsh Pasulka, who is an American writer and professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, studied religion and technology, and writes a lot about it, too. I can't wait to speak with her about that in particular. Religion and technology. She spends years interviewing influential scientists and Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who believe in extraterrestrial intelligence. Pasulka has explored spiritual phenomena, visited the purported UFO crash sites of New Mexico, and roamed the archives of the Vatican. Now, that's something, I think she has a little something extra for us tonight on that. I had to ask her about it. Because, obviously there's certain parts of those Vatican archives, that library there, that nobody's getting to. And it's hard enough to just to scratch the surface of what the hell's really out there. And we talk a lot about, you want to talk about religion and technology, or at least churches and technology. Whenever we've had people like Andrew Bashago on, invariably something like the chronovisor will come up. I want to see if she knows anything about that. But there's more. There's so much more that we can get around to. She, Diana, was chair of the Department of Philosophy and Religion from 2015 until 2019, and was principal investigator for the Teaching American History grant, which ran for 3 years from 2009, and her work has been featured in various popular venues. She wrote in 2019 the book American Cosmic. I've got it right here. Take a look. That's it on the screen. American Cosmic: UFOs, Religion, and Technology by D.W. Pasulka. And the reason why this is so interesting is not just because it's not just another UFO book or anything like that. It's the way that she made her way into researching this stuff. It wasn't a passion that had been, just been there forever. She finally wanted something to do with it, and she figured that let this be the subject of a book. Oh, no, it's so much more than that, and it's interesting. We're going to get around to that all, but anyway, American Cosmic, I think it's a really interesting thing here, because it is written from the standpoint of taking on the character, is the UFO phenomenon, especially in how it's playing out in society. Is it taking on the characteristics of a religion of its own, with differences in denomination and Genesis stories and the like? She's got another book coming out in November called Encounters. We're going to talk to her about it all tonight. Hopefully we have time for it all. There's just too much. Welcome to the show, Dr. Pasulka. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, well, it's just a wonderful night having you on. It's a Wednesday in August, and we're just chilling out. The first thing I want to start off with is, a lot of people are, first of all, they're listening to you the first time tonight, and religious studies is one of those things where I always wonder myself why a person is drawn into it. And from what I have experienced, there's usually people that are getting into it that are devoutly religious, that want to be able to know more about their own religion and also competing religions, and maybe in hopes of bolstering their faith and being able to be a more ardent defender of it. There are people who are completely agnostic, people who are atheistic, that see it as just even a importantly sociological subject to understand people and the development of civilization. And then also they're a little bit more confrontational too, want to just poo-poo on the whole thing. What drew you into the study of religious studies? Was it a religious family that you had?
No, I didn't have a religious family. I did have I lived in California, and my parents came from families that, they were, on my mom's side, they were Eastern European, and on my dad's side, they were Catholic, Irish Catholic, and their grandparents basically, would be religious, but they didn't make my parents become religious. My parents were actually just secular. They were secular. We lived in California. There was a lot of new age stuff happening. But what made me want to be religious or study religion was this. So basically, as a kid, I read a lot of philosophy, and I was really interested in what made people tick. And I wasn't particularly religious, but I was very interested in philosophical issues, like, the big questions, like what's up with life? Why are we here? That kind of thing is, most people live in poverty in the world, and there's injustice. And so that led me to study a lot of philosophical texts like Socrates and Plato, and so naturally I went to the religious texts like the Bhagavad Gita, Hinduism. I studied the Bible. And when I studied the Bible, I actually read the New Testament and, the Beatitudes, which is the Sermon on the Mount. And I was really struck by how beautiful it was. And I thought, you know what? The Bible, once I started to read it, I realized that a lot of it did not make sense. And I thought, I think I want to study the original languages, and I want to learn exactly what is said in the Bible, because I also knew that it had been translated and maybe some things had been lost in translation. And because so many people think of it as the inerrant word of God, I thought it was pretty important to study. So I also went to a Catholic school, not because my parents were religious, just because they wanted to send me to that particular school. And it was run by nuns. So this is back in the day. And the nuns were extremely holy people, and that really impacted me too. So I just naturally went into the study of religious studies. So religious studies is a discipline that's interdisciplinary. So in my department, we have an archaeologist, we have a historian, we have a person who specializes in Hebrew Bible, which, they know Hebrew, and someone who specializes in New Testament, and they know Koine Greek, which is the type of Greek that the New Testament is written in. And we have anthropologists. So it's a multidisciplinary and some people are just really atheists, they're complete atheists. So in my field, we don't advocate for religion. We just study it and we teach it. So we teach it to nurses who need to know ethical issues. We teach it to business students who are going to, say, India or China, and they need to know about the different cultures and the religions of that culture. So that's what led me to study religious studies. It started pretty young.
That's it. Yeah, I can imagine that. I went to Catholic schools my whole life too, and I got to know the Salesian sisters very well. So they had a similar impact on me. Well, one or two I didn't like too much, but all the rest were very, very nice. This is probably opening up a huge can of worms. So if it is just too huge of a topic, then we can skip over it for another time. But once you started getting into actually being able to see and work with the original languages in which all of these texts were written, and as you were saying, trying to sift through whether or not some things were being lost in translation, if something that was a little funny or incongruous in another previous reading was starting to make a little bit more sense in original intent, and like you said, linguistics. Was anything unlocked for you? What new understandings were unlocked for you by seeing things in original languages and text? And any big highlights that won't take too long?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I found was to me revolutionary, and this is how I teach it now, because a lot of these religions are about imprisonment and people being imprisoned. So if you look at Christianity, the Jews in the first century were were very much oppressed by Rome and often killed in horrible ways. And Jesus comes along and he's basically talking to Jewish people who will listen. And he says, it's almost like he's speaking in code. He's speaking to them in parables. And he's saying, wait a minute, this is how you can survive this very oppressive situation. And so when I started to learn about what Jesus actually said, I felt like this was only something that would make me more faithful instead of make me. So I knew a lot of people who would learn about the original text and things like that, and they became atheists or they became agnostic. They lost their faith. This did not happen to me. I recognized that Jesus was working within like a Socratic tradition of red pilling people,
yeah.
basically helping them understand the oppressive times that they were in. And this spoke to me. And so I definitely became a lot more religious after doing that. I wouldn't say that for all of the colleagues that I was around this happened to, but I was in a school, I directly went into graduate school where I was at the Jesuit School of Theology, and I was working with priests and people who were in priests in formation, and I was doing an academic track and they were doing a divinity track where they were actually going to become priests. And so I worked side by side them. I have the exact same training that they have, other than, I don't have the going into the parishes and that type of thing, but I have the exact same academic training as they do. I can give you one though.
Go ahead.
So one that's lost in translation is, and your listeners can look this up. It's a woman named Junia who Paul talks about in the New Testament, in the letters of Paul, and he talks about her as like an apostle, like she's really important for early Christianity. Well, when the Greek letter of Paul got translated into Latin and was put into the Bible we have today, they mistranslate. They didn't think that this was like about, 100 years later. They're like, okay, who's this person, Junius or Junia? It can't be a woman because women couldn't do that back then. So it had to be a man. So they translated her name as a man's name. So for, 1,500 years, the Christian tradition didn't know that this was actually a woman that Paul was talking about until the scholarship that we have today. We're able to go back and say, wait a minute, that name didn't even exist as a man's name. So we're able to resuscitate a lot of the diversity of early Christianity. It's
again, language. It's just huge, and that's something that we don't consider. And there's always these different printings, and you just don't know what. But that is just interesting. I would love to come back around to that at some point and talk a little bit more, because wow, that's some graduate level stuff right there. But
yeah.
what it leads me to beyond that is this whole idea of religion and technology. There's religion and language, obviously, but when it's such an interesting pairing of subjects to me, because we grow up thinking, at least I do, religion in my mind is usually something that is normally ancient, and therefore in some way or in many ways primitive and lacking any sense of what we would see modern as technology. Definitely, so what in your work, maybe this is just a difference of definition. In your work, what is that nature, the relationship between technology and religion, or the strongest relationship between the two?
Okay, great question. So when I look at technology, you have to understand, when I was in graduate school, this is in the late 1990s, and this is just as the .com, the .com was at its height before it crashed. So I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm at, in Berkeley, okay, and that's near Palo Alto. I'm taking classes in Palo Alto, at Stanford, and at Berkeley. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at digital technology, and especially in ground zero of where it was happening. And I was probably the first beta testing of kids in the 8th grade who actually had computers and were using email and that kind of thing. So I was already interfacing with technology, understanding that it was changing everything. And so so not only was I interested in religion, but I was also interested in the changes that technology was definitely bringing into my world, and I could see it was going to be a global shift. And so these came together when I started to do a work in how do people learn, how do people become believers, how do they believe, how do they get their information about religion? And it's always been through technology. So even back in, 400, 500, even before, writing is a technology. Writing was something that people devised and developed, and there were people who said, this is a terrible technology, we shouldn't be using it. And this is in 400 before the Common Era. That's BC, 400 BC. This is a long time ago. So technology has always been a way in which human beings have been able to create communities through communication. And religion is part of the reason why we have technology, because think about the printing press. When the printing press was created in the 1500s, what happened was we had a Reformation, we had a Protestant revolution, a revolution against Catholics, because Catholics had mediated what people knew about religion. And they did that through writing. They did that through only knowing what was in the Bible, and other people couldn't read it. So they owned the means of understanding the technology. And also they dispersed that technology through artwork and media. Okay. So even today, I get my students, they're all 20. Okay. They come into my class and I say, tell me about what you know about the Genesis, about the creation of the world in the book of the Bible called Genesis, and draw me a picture. And they'll draw me a picture of Adam and Eve. Okay. And I say, okay, so I'm going to tell you that everything you know about religion, you learned through the movies, and you learned through watching videos, and you learn through video games. And they're like, no. And I say, okay, you just drew me a picture, show me the picture. Invariably they draw like Adam and Eve. And I say, have you ever read the Bible? And they say, yeah. So I said, let's read it now. So we actually sit down, we read the Bible, and the Bible actually has 2 creation stories in it. One, which is Adam and Eve, but the other one is where God creates humans together. Okay. So men and women are created together, and those 2 creation stories are right there, but nobody pays attention to one of them. They only look at the other one, and they think there's only one in the Bible. And that's because of media. That's because they've been saturated with, Renaissance paintings and things like that. So when we think of creation, these are the pictures that we have in our brains. So that's how media informs, and technology informs what we know about religion.
Well, admittedly, I have not read the Bible cover to cover, and I actually intend to do that later on. I'll start later on this year, and definitely into 2024, because it's something I think I've got to do. But there's 2 parallel or at least complementary creation stories, or are they at odds with each other, both in Genesis?
Yeah, so that's what I found when I was young. So I was, I'm 11. I pick up my Bible that happens to be in my house, and I start reading it. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. There are contradictions. I don't understand. This is supposed to not be a contradictory book. And so that's what led me to think, okay, I have to figure this out, and ultimately go to graduate school. So yes, there are 2 creation stories in Genesis, and they're side by side. And they're a little bit contradictory, absolutely, and that's okay. So the Bible, so there's different ideas about why, if the Bible's contradictory, why? Okay, so the Catholics generally don't know this, but it is the Catholic view that the book of Genesis is called sacred history. It's not literal history, and Catholics don't actually view it. The position of the Catholic Church is that we don't actually view it as literal history. We view it as inspired by God, but it's sacred history. It's a history that's not considered to be completely literal. Okay, so we don't take it literally. Most Christian denominations do that. There are only a few Christian denominations, some of which are Baptists, that believe that the Bible is the inerrant word of God, and they take it absolutely literally.
Now, so this is a very great point that you've made about technology, even on a writing level, writing, art. It is media. That was the biggest medium of the day. If you had a printing press, you literally controlled what was the world at the time, or you can influence the most people that anybody could possibly do at that given moment. Now, even before Gutenberg, we talk about a little bit more speculative technological realities and in civilizations all over the planet. For example, and I was wondering if you have anything on this, because it goes outside of Christendom. For example, recently the Oppenheimer movie just came out. Some people have revisited, because of that, Robert Oppenheimer's interest in the Hindu scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, and especially the comment that he made at one point about how the atomic bomb being tested in the 20th century was just the first tested in modern times, leaving people wondering if he's referencing to the lore of an atomic ancient Indian civilization of thousands and thousands of years ago. That's just one example. We have a lot of people who now are starting to wonder if the pyramids in both Egypt and also ziggurats and temples all throughout its Central and South America are less and less likely of having been ancient burial tombs and more the remnants of what was almost like an ancient computer chip, something that was an intricate machine, a star clock, something like that. And then just things like that. So when you think about technology, do you ever go into the speculative ancient technologies that people are always theorizing and battling over these days?
Yeah, so I actually don't do it myself, but I do have friends who do that. I have a friend who does this, and he's working, he works in England, and he's an anthropologist who works on what he calls, like Stonehenge and the henges that you see. Mm-hmm. He basically identifies the star systems, which we can't see nowadays, that these were aligned with, and he created an app that allows people to actually go back in time and look at what the people back then were looking at. And so it's really interesting. So he's doing this type of work in anthropology. So absolutely, I think that there's a lot we definitely don't know about the time period. Even in the Republic, I think it's in the Republic, Plato mentions that too, where ancient Egypt is something that he says, there was some type of an extinction event. He doesn't use that word, extinction event, but he basically says, that there was something like that.
Yeah.
So you see that even in that literature.
Well, a lot of people who study and research Atlantis, they use Plato as a great resource for where it could have been, and I think he was one of the, down that line, people talked about the all the different types of locations and what it could have been, and it's a really interesting thing there. But to think about technology as just, we tend to forget that the hammer and chisel is technology, but from a 21st standpoint, if it's not electronic, it's just kind of like a baby's toy, and we don't think about how something as simple as the wheel impacted the entire world, and so I can see how that impacted especially the spread of religion and the development of religion too. So let me ask you about this now. Before we get deeper into your book, American Cosmic, I read that your study of purgatory led you to UFOs. Now, I'd love to hear about that journey, because UFOs obviously wasn't a passion of yours that you were waiting to explore. You actually you fell into it. Go right ahead and tell us about that. Yeah.
Okay, so I hate to say this, but I was one of those people who I didn't see Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I wasn't a believer in UFOs. I was actually a person who thought that was a pretty weird thing to study, even though I was studying weird things in religion, right? It never occurred to me. But no, it was off my radar completely. I had never thought of it. So I was doing my normal study, which is studying, historical Catholic and Christian records. And I work in archives. So archives are libraries of really, really old documents. And I want to show, I have one actually. So this is a digitized copy of a manuscript from the Vatican. And this is what they look like.
Wow.
So this is the canonization record of Joseph of Cupertino, and it's written in Latin, but also partially written with 17th century Italian. And So it's really old, but I was studying things for the Purgatory book that were a lot older than this. Okay. And so archives house these really old manuscripts. And so I was in there doing research on this dogma, which is a doctrine in Catholic culture, which is this idea that when a person dies, their soul doesn't actually go to heaven, but it doesn't go to hell. So where does it go? It goes to this in-between place called purgatory. And so Catholics used to believe in this. They used to do devotions to it, to souls in purgatory. And all of a sudden, after the 1960s, it fell off the map for Catholics. And so my question was, why did that happen? So I spent a lot of time doing research about that, figured it out, and also figured out a lot of other strange things. So I was going through these manuscripts, looking at them, and I kept coming across aerial phenomena and, records from every century of aerial phenomena. And so I would just write them down on a side note and think, okay, well, this is weird. And I'd cite them and I'd say, okay, someday I'm going to go back to this and look at this. I have to finish this book first. So I finished the book, and then I had this big log of aerial phenomena. We're talking about things seen in the sky like orbs, things seen in the sky like spinning discs, with beings that come out, like shiny beings.
Wow.
And things like that. Yeah, it was really weird, and I thought it was really weird. And so a lot of times when the Catholics say in the 1800s, when this happened to them, they would think that these were souls from purgatory and they needed to be prayed back into purgatory. That's what they thought. So there were different interpretations that they would give them. And so I had this list, and after my book was to the press, I was on to my next books, but I had this list. And so I had a friend, and I said, what do you think of this log? What do you think of this? And he started to read it, and we were having coffee, and he read it. He read through a lot of it, and he looked at me and he said, it reminds me of Steven Spielberg, UFOs. And I thought he was crazy. I was ready to kick him out, get out of here, you're crazy. And he said, no, I'm not kidding you. This does sound like modern day contemporary reports of UFOs. And so there was a coincidence. There was a UFO conference that was close to where I lived, and I went to it, and I heard people talking about their experiences, and they sounded exactly like my log. And so that's when it clicked for me, yes, that's exactly, there's a line, there's a tradition of this. And so I decided to do that study. So I did that study. I wasn't prepared for what I found, but that's how somebody who studies religion gets into this.
I'm to try to take that from the beginning, and the canonization record of which saint we talk about, Saint Joseph, who?
St. Joseph of Cupertino. He's the guy who levitates. So you see, if you ever see pictures of him or paintings, he's levitating, like flying around.
And maybe that's who's been spotted in the Peruvian jungle lately. They're having a lot of. But I was just, first of all, the manuscript you have over there, even though it's just a duplication, it's incredible. I think that it's just so cool, and through pining through all of that, combing through all of the stuff like that, is where you started finding these detailed records of aerial phenomena.
Yes.
And do you speak Latin? Do you speak, what kind of languages do you?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't speak Latin. So Latin is actually, I don't think anybody really speaks Latin these days unless they're at a Catholic church and it's a traditional mass. Mm-hmm. Some people do. I have a graduate student who does. But I'm head of the translation. So I can translate. There's first century Latin, there's medieval Latin, there's 17th century Latin. So even different time periods, you have to specialize in that one, like I could do, first century Latin, but I can't do 17th century Latin. But I do have this because these are actually records that I keep, and I'm part of a translation effort, and I hire the translators. Believe me, it's not easy to find people who can translate 17th century Latin intermixed with this Italian.
I bet.
So I mean, if we don't find them, though, we're gonna lose the knowledge in these records. So we do have some. They translated the first part of it, and I think it was really so weird for them that they they're like, we don't care if we're getting paid for this. We don't want to do it anymore. There's a lot of like really disturbing things in the manuscripts.
Oh man, now I want to go off and follow that rabbit hole, but I have to stay focused. Focused. Damn, with disturbing thing, like I'm thinking, what else? What else are we talking here? But I gotta say, and you're going through these manuscripts and you're finding a lengthy enough list of aerial phenomena that is being described here in some where you're even talking about pilots of crafts and things like that. Yeah. I mean, the fact that this would become a very recognizable and undeniable pattern, and the fact that it is all prior to the 20th century is huge, because if you were paying attention to this over here in our modern times, anybody who follows UFOs, you tend to think that this is really a 20th century phenomenon and everybody has reasons why. It was the dawning of the atomic age. We became almost like a galactic beacon for anybody out there that might have been monitoring us or whatever the hell it is. But by you finding things like this that are from an age of antiquity, these are huge, because right off the bat you would think that it eliminates the involvement of government, of military, and even modern commercial aviation. That's right off the bat. You can eliminate that as to what might be going on, and I think that's huge. That's really huge.
Yeah, it is huge. Another thing I want to say, though, and this is kind of like a corrective, is that because I'm in conversation with a lot of the people who are a part of the hearings that are happening. Mm-hmm. And their position is very secular in that they look at these things as, like you just used the language of pilots. I'm not sure that's what's going on. I mean, when you do look at the primary source material for some of the aerial phenomena, you do see things that appear to be like vehicles, and they appear to be intelligently flown, if you will. But to call what's happening like a person, like a pilot manning these craft, I think that's maybe not accurate.
Okay, now let me run a thought by you, because I've wondered about this. A lot of this stuff has made me, especially when we talk about biblical themes on this show. And I'll have people who come on. In fact, my guest last night, very adept in talking about the ancient celestial battles in the Bible, whether or not these were real kinetic events, and that whether or not these things we're talking about maybe biblical entities, heavenly hosts. It made me wonder about what we read in the Bible about heavenly hosts, and whether some of these more amorphous craft are in fact just, I don't know, like, for example, tell me if I'm on the right track. If we didn't know anything about fireflies, some of us could say that fireflies were in possession of advanced technology in the way that they generate light from within. Now, I know it's a lot different than seeing a craft that defies the physical laws of the universe and makes a right angle turn. But do you see any possibility that at least some of the activity in the skies is not necessarily made possible by way of technology that had been developed, but perhaps it could just be a natural state of being?
Okay, so I think I understand your question, but I'm not sure.
It's
I'm gonna ask. Okay, so when I see this aerial phenomena in the sky, let's put it from the standpoint of historical people. Okay, back in like 1,000 years ago or something, they're describing it. They're using the technology, the advanced technology that they know of, which was 1,000 years old, just like we do. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, we just don't get how these people or these ETs or whatever they are flying in this way. We just don't get it. Therefore, it must be this and this and this. And we use like the language of quantum physics, and we use like the most up-to-date science that we have, right? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what they did back then too. So let's take a first century, I think it's first century. It's actually maybe, it's first century before the Common Era. So it's not yet it's not yet after Jesus, it's before Jesus. And it's in Rome. And multiple witnesses report that they see like a battle in the sky. And they're calling. Now, what's the most advanced technology that they have at the time? Well, it's going to be the war technology that they have, like the shields that they use. And in fact, they call these things flying shields. They're saying that they look like flying shields, just like Kenneth Arnold, who in 1947 saw a bunch of things that he called flying plates. And then they got that, became the flying saucer, because he said that they were skipping like this, and that they looked really shiny. So this sounds very similar to the flying shields that they were seeing back in first century Rome, right?
Yes.
So that's what I would say. I would say that even us today, we're doing the best we can to describe something we completely don't have a framework for understanding.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that's a more than an adequate answer for what I was getting at. Now, Snow, I know that you have also spoken to space people who have been members of the space program, and you have conducted countless interviews since being led down this path. What about the astral plane, though? What about the work of people who are in places like the Monroe Institute, Project Stargate, remote viewing, out-of-body experiences? It seems like an incredible blend of both the ethereal and the physical realms that seem to be occupied by both the UFO paranormal stuff and religious supernatural themes. Are you ever interview people on that level that do that kind of work?
Well, strangely enough, yes. And it's not like I intended to do that. It's just this. Every time I went to talk to the people who were most, what you call embedded in the study of the topic, UFOs or UAPs, I found that they were actually very, very interested, if not utilizing tactics, strategies that you would call completely subjective. So they weren't using this objective science. We tend to say that science is objective, and religion is subjective. It's internal. But I didn't find that at all. I found that every single one of the most efficient of these scientists were actually really, really esoteric and subjective. And they were doing remote viewing, and they were doing these things that I would call downloading. And so I started to look into this, and I found that even the roots of our own space program, both the Russian space program and the American space program, were absolutely, they emerged out of these kinds of esoteric movements that you're just describing, like the remote viewing, the SRI. I mean, of course, that wasn't around back then, but these people were doing it anyway. So I started to ask around about this, and what I found was that a lot of people just didn't want to talk about it because they knew that that was the case, but they thought that it would sound too weird. And of course, it does sound weird, but that's what I found.
Do you think that approach has been the main contributor to the UFO community being more and more susceptible to acting very religious? You said that this has actually created a new religiosity around UFOs. Do you think that is just something that is just we're prone to do as human beings, that this kind of thing will happen, or is it a direct result of that kind of esoteric approach to this by the leading names in the field?
Okay, so I do think that human beings, whether we call it religion or not, and by the way, religion is a Western creation, a Western terminology, and other cultures don't necessarily, like some indigenous cultures don't even have this idea of religion, but they still have an idea of an invisible world that impacts this world, and that, there are intelligences within forests and things like that. And we're just actually through science beginning to figure that out as Westerners. So I just want to say that, even the demarcation of religion and not religion, that's something that we do in the West. So when you look at, so you're asking me, what I say is this, is that when I did do studies of my friend who became my friend, actually, I first worked with him on this book. His name, I don't use his real name, but he does work for the Space Force, and he was a space shuttle mission controller until the space shuttle program shut down, throughout the whole time period. And he shared with me a lot of the basically rituals that they would do just before launching rockets that they still do. So even SpaceX and, Elon Musk's out there, doing his thing. These people that are actually launching the rockets, they're involved in these really interesting rituals where they have to wear the same clothes, they have to eat the same foods, they do a prayer before the rocket launches. These are completely first century Roman theology, because they're putting emblems on their, they have these patches, but they also have the same picture on the patch is also on the rocket, and it's usually a Roman god or goddess. So it's really, you can't get away from religion here when you're looking at this.
Wow. I don't think that really shocks anybody, knowing just what the occult roots of even NASA was like so many years ago. But I guess that's part and parcel of mankind. We are very ritualistic people, and I think over time, whatever the majorities are, their ritual wins out a lot of the time. Let me ask you about this, because when we talk about people who are devoutly religious, and then of course there are UFO experiences. I guess we'll start specifically with Christianity, since that is the one that hits home for a lot of us over here in the United States and around the Western world. But UFO experiences for the devout. Just from doing this show, Diana, over the years, as long as I've been doing it, there have been quite a few devout Christians who have written to me or called in a state of almost conflict, because they are contactee. They have contactee experiences with non-human entities, whether it be an abduction or visitation or any other kind of personal revelation, where they're left with this knowing, a very sober knowing, that they experienced something, though unsettling. It was unsettling, but it was not a demon. It didn't seem like a military experiment. There was, and most importantly, it was physical. It wasn't ethereal. This causes a lot of them to shut up about it, because there is just the inference of there being a category of intelligent being that is not human nor demonic. Outside of those two opposing categories, that verges on sacrilege for some of their peers. Do you have a lot of experience with these accounts of people who are struggling between an unshakable faith but an experience that they know was outside of the bounds of anything that they can consider normal?
Absolutely, yes. This happens to a lot of people, and if they come into my experience, I try to help them by explaining that this is something that happens within the Christian tradition. And if they're Catholic, I point them in the direction of Teresa of Avila, who is a doctor of the church. She had an experience like this. She talks about it. It shocked her. She wasn't sure at first if it was an angel. It was a being that was about 3 feet tall, and it was shiny. And it was. If you've read John Mack's book, Abduction, you'll see that her experience could have been a chapter in his book. It follows along the template of what happens during an abduction. But because she was so confused, she called it a cherub, which is an angel that's small. And she said that it didn't look like an angel that she was like the type of angel that she was aware of. So she said, I'll just call it a cherub. So these happen. And of course, people are going to not talk about it. It's a traumatizing experience for one, but also once you tell people about it, you get re-traumatized, because up until these days, people don't talk about that kind of thing. And they're pretty horrified to hear about it, because they're thinking that it is something demonic or something like that. So they're going to look at it through the lens of their own faith and experience. And if they're completely atheist, they're going to think their friend has lost it, right? And these are all terrible things that actually lots of people have happened to them, and they could be professionals even, and their jobs could be at stake if any of this gets out.
Absolutely. Well, let's go outside of Christianity. Do you find that other world religions are facing similar challenges when they try to reckon what's going on above them and what other personal, more intimate experiences a person has when encountering the unknown like this? Is this this can't just be a topic of debate within Christendom?
No, it's not. It is a global phenomenon, and people have different interpretations of it from different cultures, and they even call it different things. There are also, what I found, and I actually write about this in the book that I just finished, indigenous cultures, they even have their own traditions of contact. And they do talk about that, and they don't have the fear-based, well, some of them do. Some of them say, don't make contact with these things. If they come, do your best to try to ignore them. But they also have levels of initiation into the knowledge of these things, which I also found in our own traditions. So we also have, if, say, people back in the day called these things various types of angels. Well, there are esoteric movements within, at least Christianity and Judaism that account for these kinds of experiences and actually help people negotiate how to deal with them.
Well, on that then, let me ask you this: you have a lot to say about synchronicity, and a lot to say about what we are able to kind of bring into our experience by really training our consciousness to see more of one thing, almost like self-fulfilling prophecies, how to set that aside from what is just the very digital, I don't know, we're being spied on constantly by technology, and the algorithms are just giving us things that we say out loud that we don't know we're speaking into some microphone on the other side of the room. So there's a lot of things that mimic synchronicity, but it's just creepiness from the technological age. But outside of synchronicity and algorithms, what about miracles? What have you done? Obviously, you're in those Vatican archives. If you're reading anybody's canonization records, every Catholic saint has at least 3 miracles under his or her belt. So what have you been able to pull from that, since it does fall within the supernatural, the paranormal sometimes? Any thoughts on miracles?
Yeah. I mean, once you start studying religion and you're not what we call reductive, which is we just say, oh, there's a natural explanation for this, because sometimes there's not a natural explanation. And we have to just be open-minded about that. Maybe there will be in 30 years, but we sure don't know it now, okay? So there are things that then it's a miracle if we don't know the natural explanation for it, and it seems as if this should not have happened, right? We call that a miracle. So yeah, I mean, there are miracles all the time. And so when you're asking me about synchronicity, are you asking me about my thoughts about it as related to miracles? Because those are 2 different kinds of things.
Oh yeah, I know they're 2 different kinds of things, but but in some way they are kind of mystical and magical. You wonder whether or not with synchronicity, if you are tapped into something energetically and consciously, that there is a maybe an involuntary, but I don't know. There's something that is feeding into it. Maybe we do it involuntarily, but it happens. And then, of course, miracles, it almost seems like it's a superpower somebody has been able to wield, at least for a moment. So I don't know if you can speak to both if you'd like, but I just wonder what you had on miracles in particular.
Oh, yeah. So miracles are absolutely, they do happen. And especially when you're doing the when a saint is being canonized and the miracle has to be verified, it goes through a process that's rigorous. Not only do they get people on the case who are not Catholics, but they also get people who are called devil's advocates. That's actually where the devil's advocate comes from, is the canonization of the saint. The people on the committees for this do everything they can to try to say, no, this didn't happen. No, there's this explanation. And they get medical doctors who are not Catholic. They do their best to verify, because they don't want to be found wrong. And so, when there's an established miracle, it's because we can't find an explanation for it. And it seems miraculous, especially because it's synchronistically tied usually to the person asking for that saint's intercession. So they're not praying to the saint. They're basically saying, Saint Teresa, help me, help me by pleading my case to God or something like that. Save my child who has cancer or this inoperable terminal illness. And then the child is miraculously saved. Well, there's the synchronicity of this happening while the person is earnestly asking for it. And then the doctors come in and they're like, okay, it just doesn't look like it should have happened. So they verify it. So that happens, and that's how synchronicity is linked to it. What I found was that a lot of people have synchronicity, and synchronicity are these coincidences that happen that seemingly should not happen. Probabilistically, seemingly should not. Now, if the world is infinite, if time is kind of simultaneous but infinite, maybe then they would happen. But why do they happen so much to certain people all the time? I have a friend named Gary Nolan. He's a professor at Stanford, and he was actually a person in my book who I worked with in American Cosmic, and I called him James in my book because he wasn't comfortable at that time in 2019 being out as a professor who studies UFOs. But he did some calculations about synchronicities and the probabilities, and he said, no, it's just not. Some things are just not possible and truly weird, in terms of synchronicity. Some people think that synchronicities point to like an inner meaning. They happen a lot to me, especially when I'm doing research. One just happened to me. I'll give an example. I'm writing this encyclopedia entry on UFOs, and I needed a citation, and I couldn't find it. So I had it about a year ago, and I was like, okay, I know I had the citation. I looked everywhere in all the computers that I have. And I couldn't find it. And I was really upset with myself because this was the one thing I needed. I needed this article. And so I gave up and I said, I guess I won't include that article. And then somebody I don't know from Switzerland emailed me and said, have you read this article? And it was that article. And I thought, oh, this is great. This is the exact one I need. And at the time I needed it too. I needed it right then. And I thought this is a pretty interesting synchronicity. Now, some people could say that it was meant to be. Well, I can't say that because I can't prove it, but I can say this. I sure did need it, and I'm going to use it now. So it was really helpful.
Whether we're talking about what's going on above us, or whether we're talking about these things that it almost feels like we tap into a current of energy and there is just limitless possibilities for some kind of a need to be fulfilled in unexplained ways or whatever. There is just, I don't know. I think you're in the best field of work to be able to ask all the big questions about where we really are going and what we're meant to be doing here and what our abilities are. I mean, there's just so much. There's so much about ability that is deja vu. I don't know if what deja vu has to do with synchronicity, but there's something weird. I don't care what people say about deja vu. There is something that defies all logic about the familiarity of getting caught in deja vu, especially when it doesn't stop. I just think that there is so much here, and the further you dig, the farther you always find another point that connects. And so tell us a little bit, unless you had something else you wanted to add to that, please tell us a little bit about your upcoming book, Encounters, because I think it is a little bit more complementary to what you put out with American Cosmic, no?
Yeah. So, all right. So I finished American Cosmic, and so it didn't stop there, all the things that I discovered. And so I wrote Encounters, and what I wanted to do, because after I wrote the book American Cosmic before the New York Times, Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper published the 2017 Black Programs and UFOs, so my book was in press. And then it came out. So I had written the book before it was public knowledge about the programs that were being, the government ran about studying UFOs. And so in my book, American Cosmic, I'm actually talking to the people who are doing that and saying, okay, wow, I didn't know this was the case, but this is happening. And so I published it. then the government, comes out and says, yeah, we're doing this. And then all of a sudden we have these congressional hearings and everything. And what I noticed was that there was a huge emphasis on the very topic of if there are these crafts and crash retrievals and, what are these things? And I thought, this isn't actually what I found to be the case. So I wanted to put out there a book that talks to people who would know what these things, the nature of them and things like that. And it's not what we're hearing. And so I just wanted, I wanted to kind of set the record straight for at least what my research discussed, and talking to the people who are actually interfacing with these things. And so Encounters is exactly that. It's talking about, it's not the military UFO. It's not the UFO that the military is saying, these are things, they have pilots, this is happening, basically looking like our craft, but only super advanced. Well, these things are way weirder than that. And so I wanted to share that story. So that's what Encounters is about. And it's not just about encounters with UFOs, although most chapters are about that. It's also about encounters with other things that happen along with encounters with UFOs, because when people do encounter UFOs, sometimes other things happen to them too. And you can even see this in media. Like, I did finally see Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and I thought that Steven Spielberg did a really good job of showing the really weird stuff that happens, like the paranormal stuff that happens when people have these experiences. And so when I talk to people who've had these experiences, a lot of paranormal things are happening in their homes, around them, and things like that. And I wanted to give insight into that.
Oh, well, I can't wait to read this then, especially because, and I've read about that stuff there too. It's almost like the phenomenon of getting struck by lightning and surviving, and then suddenly you can read somebody's mind afterwards. There's just something that's not the same. And that's interesting. One last question, I guess, and because it's not a spoiler or anything like that, and everything that you have done in the research that has followed your initial spark of inspiration on all of this, have you noticed whether or not there is more so of a benevolent or a malevolent presence in the skies above us, and people are always wondering whether or not we are we're about to make really great friends with our galactic neighbors, and they're going to tell us a new way of growing corn and being more sustainable and all that other crap. And they always come here like Klaatu, and they saying, oh yeah, everything's fine if you just save your planet and vote for this person. Like, what is what do you take away from all this stuff? Do you think that they are a little bit, is there any motivation? There's people who have horrific stories that can only be described as terrifying. There's others that are just even a more benevolent experience. You're still coming face to face with something you don't see every day. It is going to leave you awake at night. So is there a spectrum of experience that you have collected from people that are more so concerning or exciting?
Yeah, this is such a great question and super important. So I would say that it's a sad situation that it's both, but mostly I would say not the best. Okay. Oh. So, that's my California way of saying it's bad.
Oh boy.
So, yeah, not the best. So I have a space, a couple pages devoted to this in American Cosmic, where I'm in New Mexico with James and Tyler, and we're about to go to the crash site, right, of a alleged UFO crash site. And I'm not a believer. Okay, so I'm there. This is back in 2017 or 2016, around that. So I'm going to this place where we're at this bed and breakfast. We're hanging out, we're drinking some beer at night. And Gary shows us some of his research. Now, he's that Stanford professor. And by the way, if anybody's really interested in following up on this question of yours, they need to watch his Tucker Carlson interview, because he actually does talk about this. And so he's showing us his research. And with Tyler, the research is the the UFO experiences have been positive, and they've helped them create amazing technologies, right? But what Gary's doing is he's looking at people that have been hurt. And so he's showing photo after photo after photo after photo of the injuries that these people have sustained. And I was so disturbed after seeing that. I remember I prayed, I said, I don't know what's going on, but I pray for protection of, what I'm doing, what I'm learning here. And so I would say that I actually just found a letter that I got in 2019. Somebody had read American Cosmic, and this was a person who was elderly. So they wrote me a hard copy letter. And so I had it in a stack of mail that I just haven't opened because I've been so busy. But I opened it about a month ago, and I read through the whole thing, and it was pretty long. And this person was young in the 1950s and had a series of sightings and was very fascinated, and then followed the UFO, topic. And then what happened was followed it to the point of like learning about all of the different sightings in that person's area. And then finally said, and then when I realized that a lot of pilots were being killed, I stopped doing this research. And I mean, that really stopped me too. I read the letter up to that point, and I was like, okay,
I think that's, and you elaborate on this a little bit more in Encounters, you said?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I just present the data, that I've collected from good experiences to bad experiences.
Yeah, it runs the gamut all over the place.
It does.
It really does. And man, oh man. Well, I know one thing, Doctor. You got to come back on after that book is out, whether it be right after the new year or something like that. Who knows? But I'd love to have you back. You've been a really wonderful time and wonderful conversation as well. If there's anything else, please let people know where to find you. I have your I think your URL is in the description of this episode. I have to make sure it's there. But where should people go to follow all of your work?
Sure. So I'm DW Pasulka, dwpasulka.com. I think that website is actually being redone right now, but it's up there. And I'm on Twitter at that handle, and also Instagram.
Wonderful. Well, I have you tagged on the Twitter post right now of us going live, so there's that, but I'll make sure that all of that is inside of the description of this episode before I upload it to all of the on-demand services and podcasts. But this has been a wonderful night. Thank you so much, Dr. Pasulka. It's great to have you on, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is a nice. I'm over the moon. I really am delighted about that. Let me go into your super chats because I'm not going to go on a intermission right now. We got one from Stowstube. Says great Wednesday, Frank. Thank you, Stowstube. It's great to have you in there. And on Foxhole, let's see, 823. I don't think I should take any calls either. I'll probably just collect whatever you guys and gals say in the emails, and maybe we can take some calls in the second half of tomorrow night's show if there's any time, or on Friday night. We'll mix it in with Deer Scene episodes. Maybe I'll set up a Deer Scene line. The specialty line on Friday night will be Deer Scene. Everything else will be whatever is left over from... How do you not have something to say about tonight? That's I had a lot of fun with that one. Robert Sarnes, thank you so much. On QuiteFrankly.tv. Sean Joe, Jesse, 81138, Boyce Blanc, Doug Simmy, the usual crew. I'm very, very happy and grateful for them all. And Big Lou says, Frank, someone needs to do clips from best segments of every show. We can grab them and share social media. Oh, listen, I know, Big Lou. I know. The question is, who's going to help me do the clips? Because to bring on somebody to do it, you have no clue how thankless the situation is. I go live for 2 hours every night, and inside of every 2-hour show, no matter how uneventful it is, and I don't think we have too many uneventful shows, there is so much. There's funny things, there's weird things, there's so much it's so much inside of every 2-hour show that for some people it could be a week's worth of media. and to sift through all of that, make timestamps and notes and all that, cut it all out, get ready to be put out there, and have the next night start all over again, and then the next week, the next month, and every night it's a lot. It's a lot. So that's why I say if we can get a lot of people in the audience, everybody out there, to help out little by little, the little turns into a heaping pile of a lot. And then at that point, no matter who upload, you don't even have to send it to me. Upload highlights of the show, tag me in it. If I see it, if I like it, I'll grab it myself and I'll upload it to the Instagram, to the Rumble or something like that. But the more the highlights of the show are out on the internet, the more people are going to see it and say, what's this from? Invariably, more people are going to come, and we'll have more Franklies in our midst and more fun for all the years to come. So I have to beg you all. I mean, I'll always have people that I can say, hey man, this is a really good clip right here. This 5 minutes. Can you do this for me? I'll always have Al Gorbachev out there. He's always willing to help, people like that. But the larger thrust of this operation, it would be really great to have you all involved. And again, thank you so much to Dr. Diana Pasulka. Hope everybody goes out and checks out her book and all the books to come, because there's a lot more. All right, that's all I have for you. I got through all the super chats, and now I have to go do book club. I have just enough time to go run down the hall and do wee-wee. So that's all I have. Good night. Bye.
Just a little bit of a reminder, a word to the wise, if you will. Do not worry about the worries from yesterday. Leave it in the past. Move forward with confidence, because there are so many new things to be experienced today, new joy to be had. So move forward, be strong, and have a great rest of your day.